Minister, we hope one or two will join us, but without much ado, let me hand over to the Chair.
Thank you very much, Chief Secretary. And once again, welcome. Today I have with me the Minister of Justice, Honorable Ziyambi, and we hope we'll be joined later by the Minister of Trade and Commerce, Honorable Glovo. Cabinet today got an update on the Cyclone Idai recovery program. The brief was given by the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, as the acting chairperson of the Interministerial Committee on the Emergency Preparedness and Disaster Management, that government efforts towards the recovery, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and settlement in the Cyclone Idai affected areas. The work continues to be done, is being done there. There are already fruits. The work which has been done is beginning to bear fruits as life is almost back to normal in most of the affected areas. These efforts will be boosted by the offer of another $75 million support coming to be extended towards infrastructure development, and this support is coming from the World Bank. Budgetary requirements for the exercise has already been availed to a team of World Bank officials who were recently in the country. Then there's issue of identity cards for most of those affected victims. The issuance of identity documents for victims of Cyclone Idai is set to begin around mid-June 2019, at which time the imported consumables to be used by the Registrar General's Department for the purpose should have been received in the country. In terms of food distribution will now be done once per month. A total of 18 irrigation projects have been fully restored in Chimanimani and Chipinge, with productive activities now in full swing. To date, no case of cholera have been reported in the affected areas. However, rapid response teams have been sent to deal with reported cases of malaria in Chipinga, Mchangwa, and Chimanimani areas. A model housing scheme has now been developed for the disaster-prone areas of Chimanimani and Chipinge. That is as far as the report back from the Cyclone Idai. Cabinet also received the principles of the Water Amendment Bill. Apart from aligning the Water Act to the Constitution in respect of the right of every person to safe, clean, and potable water, the bill also provides for the following. 1, the need to take into account inter alia primary use, environment conservation, agriculture, mining, industry, and factors such as gender and disability in the allocation of water resources. It also looks at to provide that declaration of river systems by the minister will include wetlands in order to lay emphasis on their protection. It also provide guidelines on restrictions on cessation of rights to use water, to provide for increased management and protection of water resources and to limit pollution, to expand the procedure for reservation of areas likely to be required for dam basins or dam sites, to expand the minister's powers to reserve water to include groundwater, and to provide for the increased management and protection of water resources, taking into account the increased demand for groundwater. That is as far as the principles of the Water Bill. Cabinet also approved the principles of the Human Rights Amendment Bill as presented by the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. Over and above the need to align the Zimbabwe Human Rights Act, Chapter 10.30, to the Constitution, the proposed amendments also seek as follows. 1, to ensure that the Act is in compliance with international best practices as contained in the Paris Principles. 2, to allow for cooperation with other constitutional commissions, such as the Zimbabwe Gender Commission and the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. Also, to give effect to certain amendments proposed by the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, and to provide for the gender of the Deputy Chairperson to be different from that of the chairperson. We're talking here about gender, meaning female and male. To refuse investigations into frivolous or trivial complaints. And finally, to require the Commission to publish reports which are backed by facts and evidence. That is as far as the principles of the Human Rights Bill. Cabinet also received a presentation from the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs on principles to amend the High Court Act, Chapter 7.06, in order to bring it into alignment with the Constitution of Zimbabwe. All this is being done to realign it with the Constitution of Zimbabwe, Amendment number 20, Act 2013. The principles of the proposed High Court Amendment Bill specifically provide as follows. A, that the composition of the High Court for the purpose of exercising its jurisdiction in any constitutional matter should consist of one or more judges of the High Court. 2, that every person should have the right of access to courts or to some tribunal or forum established by law for the purpose of dispute resolution. And finally, that every person accused of an offense be provided with the right to a fair and public trial within a reasonable time before an independent and impartial court. That is the principles of the High Court Amendment Bill. Then we got also an update on the disbursement of the emergency business relief funds. Cabinet received this report from Minister of Industry and Commerce, updating the Cabinet on the disbursements on the Emergency Business Relief Fund for business affected by the 14th to 16th January 2019 violent demonstrations. The criteria used in the disbursement of the loans to the affected beneficiaries included, among many other, that cash payments are to be made directly to suppliers of products, wholesalers, or producers, with drawdowns accompanied by invoices, receipts, and also that the affected business would submit lists of their major suppliers. So far, a tranche of 10 million out of the 30 million earmarked for the program has been disbursed into the loan fund account. The total value of stocks looted and damages to property and equipment belonging to the affected business is about 24 million. And a total of 4.9 million has already been disbursed to replenish the stocks. Currently, the affected provinces are processing requests for equipment and infrastructure, with the disbursements expected to start this week. Cabinet also received a report from the Minister of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services on the Chinese Global Development Strategy, the Belt and Road Initiative. This initiative is centered on road, rail, and seaport links as a means to facilitate trade and development. This is set to benefit Zimbabwe's thrust to become an upper middle income country as encapsulated under Vision 3. And to this end, Zimbabwean government has already set up a dedicated Belt and Road Initiative team that will work especially with our neighbors to fulfill that vision, using this global economic development vehicle of Belt and Road Initiative. Specifically, the OPC and the China's National Development and Reform Commission, NDRC, which is the Chinese Super Cabinet Committee, will be working flat out to make sure that we realize the benefits from this. I want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the presentation of the 17th meeting of Cabinet's decision matrix. Now we are going to be inviting, as usual, members of the media to pose their questions to the Minister and her colleague. We'll take 4 questions in this first session. You say who you are, who you represent. Can we have your submissions? Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Ramada Muruya from the Herald. My question is directed to the Honorable Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. in respect of the Human Rights Amendment Bill. My question is, what are the essential elements of that bill? And related to that, if the bill addressed the concerns that were once raised in Parliament, particularly in regard to the powers conferred to the minister in the administration of the bill, where it was felt that it is the effect of undermining the independence of the Human Rights Commission. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other question? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Belinda Chaura of Zim Papers TV Network. My question goes to the Minister of Justice, I think, as well, in relation to the Water Amendment Bill. I wanted to find out particularly in relation to wetlands and the protection of wetlands. There have been instances that have been raised by residents and also council members in different parts of the country about people building on wetlands, but developers and individuals building on those wetlands have not been prosecuted. So I wanted to find out if that bill addresses that concern specifically.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Leo Monende from newzimbabwe.com. Mine is not necessarily a question, but I just wanted to understand. May the Minister of Information please share with us why government did not discuss the current fuel hikes, the current fuel crisis. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, please.
Sarah Sinara from Al Jazeera. Maybe this is to Minister of Justice or Minister of Information. There's reports of arrests of human rights activists on their return from the Maldives. The human rights organizations are accusing government of trying to clamp down on the rights of their work. Do you have a comment on that?
Yes, but the issue was not discussed in cabinet. But anyway, the ministers will see how to handle that. So over to the
Thank you.
minister.
Thank you very much, Chief Secretary. Thank you to Mr. Murgira of Herald. I think it's a clear question to you, Honorable, where he's asking about, in respect of the HR amendments, Human Rights Amendment Bill. He says the essential element, can you please talk about the essential elements of the bill? And also he is actually wanting you to talk about what was raised in Parliament in regards to powers to the minister, which affect or undermines the commission. I think that was your question, right? That was your question, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I must state that this is not a bill. These are principles that will be used to draft the bill. So, in essence, what we are going to do is we are going to align the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission bill that was enacted in 2012 before the new constitution came into play with the new constitution. And more specifically, we have listed the areas that we'll look at. We want to ensure that there's greater cooperation between the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission and other sister commissions like the Gender Commission and the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. If you go into the Constitution, you'll notice that the functions of these commissions are more or less similar. So we want to give effect by way of legislation to the cooperation that must exist between these commissions. And we also have been looking at amendments that the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission are proposing to ensure that when we are drafting, they are also incorporated. And the other issue is the current act does not address the issue of the chairmanship, to say that you need, if you have a female chairperson, you need a male, so that we have gender balance according to the Constitution. Those are the issues that are there. And we also, when we are drafting, we also consider international best practice as recommended by the Paris Principles, so that when we scrub the act and we align it, it is consistent with the constitution as well as international best practice. So the bigger part of your question will be answered when the bill has been drafted and presented to cabinet and approved, and then we'll be able to now look at the clauses of the bill and unpack it. And then your last, the other part was the concern that the minister has got powers over the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. I think the current act is governed by provisions of the Constitution. The current act was enacted to give effect to the constitutional provisions that guarantee the independence of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. So that part, in terms of legislation, is covered. There is no conflict whatsoever between the powers of the minister and what the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is supposed to do. I think
if I just maybe I would need to bring you back. Belinda Chaura wanted to know about the principles on the water amendment bill. I think a question was, will this bill address those concerns coming from the people where wetlands, there are developers actually building on wetlands? I don't know if you can consider.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. This bill will also address that. As you may be aware, the water bill in its current structure does not designate wetlands as part of rivers in order to ensure that they are also conserved. So what we are going to do is, Cabinet agreed that the Ministry of Water, the Ministry of the Ministry of Water and Environment, they will sit down to ensure that we harmonize the principles so that what you are looking at is also taken on board when we are drafting the bill. So definitely that will be covered when these two ministries have looked at the principles again, trying to tackle those areas so that when we draft the bill, that will be taken into consideration. I think.
Thank you, Minister. On the question from newzimbabwe.com, Cabinet is very much seized with the critical problems which are out there in terms of energy shortages, where we are having a load shedding at the moment. There are also queues for fuel, and this is an issue which is discussed at each and every cabinet. Strategies have been put into place, and time will be coming when we'll be giving you back those strategies. But a lot of work and a lot of debate has been going on. This is an issue which gets debated each and every cabinet because it affects our people. Thank you. The other one was not discussed. The HR activist was not discussed in cabinet. Yeah. Unless you want to
no, thank you. That one was not discussed. But what I have to say is, arrests are based on the evidence that is there. So I'm not privy to this case, and I will not be competent to discuss about it, as these are not issues. These are operational issues that are not normally discussed in cabinet. I thank you.
Okay.
Okay. We welcome latecomers. We will give you an opportunity for the last round. I don't know what you be asking. Let's start with the Chambago there.
Thank you.
Then I will see somebody at the back.
And undershare kuti nasa unokuya.
My first question goes to the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. You stated that the amendment for the High Court, I don't know if the bill is the principles. You can always
Principles.
It's the principles, yes. You stated that one will be charged and made to be presented in court within a reasonable time. What's the current position as things stand right now? And going forward, is there a projection as to what is this reasonable time frame? And then my second question goes to the Minister of Information on the Belt and Road initiative. You are like set up from this side, liaising with our neighbors, as well as the chief from China. What projects are you trying to work on, and what are the time frames to which you want these projects to be completed?
Okay. Yes, sir. I identify.
My name is Vishnu Fundipa. I'm a freelancer. Minister Msamba, during your presentation, you mentioned model houses in the disaster-prone areas where these agreed upon with consultation with the people. And are these houses going to be like voluntary? Can anybody put up their own kind of structure? And is government going to help people with material for putting up these houses? Thank you.
Last question. Put it this side. You just hold your chin. Oh, yes.
Don't have a question.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Okay,
so
good.
we have those two.
Very good. Minister Zambi, you can tackle the one which came from Chambaba. I think he was talking about that reasonable time.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The provision that we are seeking to amend pertains to appeals that are lodged within the High Court and also the rights of people who will be incarcerated in prison. In its present format, it says you pay an appeal fee, and it also stipulates that you must present yourself when you are appealing. It's problematic in that those that are incarcerated, they can't present themselves. And indigent and those that are also incarcerated, they cannot pay this amount, most of them. Yet the Constitution prescribes that everyone has a right to a fair trial. So what it will do is, in its current state, it discriminates those that do not have money and those that have. And this is inconsistent with the letter and spirit of the Constitution. So that is what we are looking at aligning with the Constitution to ensure that it's removed, those provisions are removed, I think.
Good, thank you very much. And on the issue of BRI, I think this is the Belt and Road Initiative is going to take the world. It's almost like Belt Fire. This is an initiative by the President Xi Jinping of China, and it actually is talking about developing the whole area from China all the way to Eurasia, coming into Africa, into Europe. And obviously for our country to get the benefits of it, we need to develop our country in terms of our road, our rail, our airports, to make sure that we benefit from the global economy, which is actually going, most of it will be actually digital economy. So Zimbabwe is actually working flat out to make sure that we get also access to the loans for this kind of infrastructure. We need, this is a lot of money, and the monies will actually be availed to actually come up with all this kind of infrastructure to make sure that everybody benefits. The issue, we're also fast-tracking special economic zones. It actually means then the products which will be produced in Zimbabwe, value addition, beneficiation will be happening in our country. Our people will be getting jobs. This is very good for the economy, and it's in line with the vision 2030, which brings our economy to a middle income. So certainly work will be done, and obviously we'll be working with Mozambique. Since we're a land-linked country, we'll be working with Mozambique and other our neighboring countries to make sure that we have access to the sea. In terms of the model houses in Chimanimani, our people, our committee, the Interministerial Committee, has been consulting a lot with the stakeholders, all stakeholders in Chimanimani, in the affected areas. And like we say, the model houses are really for those disaster-prone areas. It's not for the whole country, but for those disaster-prone areas. We want to make sure that we build houses which, whenever this disaster, if ever it comes back, we want to minimize on people's lives and destruction of property. So this is something which is being done with the consultation with all stakeholders and the building of the houses. There is actually a private company which is actually have actually pledged to build 500 of those houses. This is highlight, if I may say. Yes, they are going to build. They're beautiful houses. We've got a very good design of it, beautiful homes, and strong, which will make sure that our people, whenever this kind of thing happens, our people can actually be saved in terms of lives, in terms of property. So this is an ongoing consultation with people. There's nothing which is being done there. The people are not being left behind. You saw last time even the president went to talk to the chiefs, to the traditional leaders. So everybody is being brought on board to make sure that we all move together in terms of making sure that we minimize any loss of life and damage to our property in the future if it happens again. Thank you.
Payments. Who's paying for the houses?
Who is paying for the houses? Like I said, High Life is actually building. It's voluntary. I mean, they are coming up with their own money to build for the people. 500 houses is what they are going to build in the initial stages.
I thought I had closed, but I just give you.
Thank you so much. I just want to understand something which would have been outside the discussion, but it is of interest to the public. There are reports that the government got a loan from Agazimbe using the Blackjam as a collateral. Would you like to think that this juncture you can save the resolution information on what exactly transpired in that notice?
I think the minister cannot answer directly because the issue was never raised. But I don't know, possibly another time when we with the Minister of Finance is back. But certainly there was no discussion, and we are hearing it from you. There isn't anything like that.
And just to say, I mean, this is a press conference where we are giving you back with exactly what we have discussed in Cabinet. Any other questions, you can always approach our ministry or even directly to the Minister of Finance. Yes.
So I think we call it a day. We have come to the end. We want to thank you very much, and also the honourable ministers for ably giving the decisions of Cabinet to the media. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.